both of my parents were Holocaust survivors. My mom came from a small town near what was then called in Poland Gdansk. Her father, it was in an area called Pomorze, when the Germans rolled into Poland. And when they came into Poland, they came into that part of Poland from Germany. And when they took Gdansk, the name was changed to Danzig. They took his entire business, which was a wholesale fabric business, and confiscated everything they had. As a family, they were pushed out of the northern part of Poland there, down into the southern main part of Poland, and my mom met my dad there. They were pushed into a small town called Starachowice. Wierzminik one side was Jewish, one side was Gentile, so most towns of that nature had two names. That's where my dad grew up. My mom was, as I mentioned, was one of 6 sisters, all of whom died in Poland, except for one aunt who was a graduate of a concentration camp in Poland, which is probably the most famous one, which is Auschwitz. And she ended up with numbers on her hand. Her husband, my uncle, also had numbers on his arm. And what my parents didn't, when my mom and her family moved down, their family name was Bromberger. My grandfather's name was Ben Sion. His wife was Ita, my grandmother. I can't remember all the names of my mom's sisters, but the one that survived was named Sesha. And there was another one, Rachel, Marcia, and I can't remember all of them. Anyway, 6 sisters. They moved all down with their parents, moved down to my dad's town, now almost empty-handed because everything had been confiscated by the Germans, by the Nazis. When they were in the town where my dad lived, Starachowice, Wierzminik, they recouped their life a little bit and gained some level of stability, but it didn't last very long because the Germans were marching that way and would eventually encompass all of Poland. But in the meantime, they had a little bit of a life. They had to remake their lives. They had enough money. My grandparents were on the wealthy side of things, and so they had enough money put away that they could reestablish themselves. But my mother's father knew something was coming. Of course, how could you not? And so he actually ended up sewing American money, somehow purchased American dollars, and in all of his daughters' coats, he had sewn American dollars inside the lining of the coats. So that when the Germans came down and they took over this small town, they put all the Jews in a labor camp. They didn't immediately go to a concentration camp. They were put to work, slave labor. The labor camp was called Starachowice after the town. The Germans set up an encampment there. It became a command post for the Nazi army, for the German army. Plus, they had a labor camp, so they had lots of Jewish people doing a lot of work for them. My dad had, as I mentioned, one brother. Actually, he had one brother and 2 sisters. And his brother and sisters were all married. They all had children. And all of them put in the labor camp, along with my mother's family, and eventually were all killed. My dad's entire family was killed. His parents, my grandparents, were all killed. My dad was the only survivor. At one point, while they were in the labor camps, which was surrounded by barbed wire and dogs and towers with guards with machine guns, just as you can imagine and picture, some of the young people were plotting an escape. And so from this labor camp. Of course it was dangerous. Of course a percentage of them would just die. They knew that. But they wanted to escape. The story my mom tells me, or told me when I was young, was that she went to my dad and to her dad and her mom, my grandparents on my mother's side, and said, I can't leave you. I'm not going to go with them. I can't leave you here. My grandfather and my grandmother said, you have to go. The next generation has to live. You have to live. So they infused her with courage, and she went with her sisters. Someone, probably in multiple places, but some of the young guys cut the barbed wire. They were spread it, they ran out. As soon as the dogs started barking, the towers lit up with spotlights. The guards saw that the young people were escaping, and they opened up machine gun fire. My mother was running with one of her sisters in particular, and the machine gun fire just cut her down. And she was lying in my mother's arms, dead already, I'm sure, but blood all over my mom. And so a couple of young Jewish guys who were escaping yelled at her and grabbed her and said, she's gone, you can't help her anymore, get up and run for your life. So my mom got up, not sure how she did it, but she did, got up, began to run for her life, and the machine gun fire was still going and cut her through her legs. Didn't hit her bone, fortunately, but went right through her flesh. I remember growing up seeing the scars just above her knees. She fell immediately, of course. Both of her legs went out from under her. Again, a couple of young Jewish guys came and grabbed her, one by each arm, and said, get up, you can't stay here, you can't stay here. And so she was in pain, but still conscious, helped by these two young guys, ran. She couldn't run, they were dragging her. And actually they dropped her off at a Polish family's home, who they must have known were, at least on some level, were sympathizers. And she was hidden by this Jewish family, this Polish family. And she was hidden there for a long period of time, probably for 2 or 3 years, as Rita's mother experienced. And they nursed her back to health. She gave them all the American money that was sewn into the lining of her coat. The Germans hadn't discovered it. She gave them all the American money while she stayed there. And here she is. She's a beautiful, beautiful young girl, beautiful young teenager, who could have died just by bleeding out, but this Polish family took her in, risked their own family's lives. They had children also. And she, as I mentioned, she lived there for 2 or 3 years. She started going to Catholic church with them. She had blonde hair and green eyes, so they called her a Yeke, kind of a German. And she passed as a distant cousin of the family who had lived in another town, but had been sent to stay with them because of all the danger. But it was a cover-up for her being Jewish. So she went to Catholic church for a couple of years, learned how to do all the things in the Catholic church, but always remained faithfully Jewish in her identity, secretly. One day she woke up, one night, in the middle of the night she woke up, and she knew the SS, the secret police of the Nazis were coming to find her. Somebody had discovered her identity. And so she woke up in the middle of the night, got dressed, didn't tell the family, and left, and ran out into the woods. There she had to endure some unspeakable things, and I'm not going to speak them because she wouldn't speak to them. She wouldn't say them all of my growing up life until I took her to the first gathering of Holocaust survivors in Washington, D.C. way back in the 1970s. And there she became so emotional. We shared a hotel room together. She became so emotional. She opened up to me and told me some things that I just can't repeat. But she was subjected to unspeakable things among the Polish partisans who actually saved her life but made her pay for it. Ultimately, I don't know how much time she spent with them, but ultimately they took her to the Russian border, and she had to jump over a German trench to get to the Russian side of the border, and there she waited out until the end of the war.